Hey everyone. So on Monday, we were working on our rhetoric journal, number one, for pages 3 through 74. This is not due until Monday the 19th, and you should have this at all pages read, as well as this journal when you walk into class. We will have a reading check quiz. However, we were going over the rhetoric journal, and I was trying to give you a teacher model, but we ran out of time. So this video is to just make sure you understand how to do the rhetoric journal. Just to kind of go back to what we're doing, essentially it's kind of like annotating, but it's on a much deeper level. I'm looking for a lot more analysis in this. So if we remind ourselves that rhetoric is the use of spoken or written words or a visual medium, could be an advertisement, to convey your ideas and convince an audience. It's that persuasive language. It's using language effectively to persuade the audience or convince the audience of a message, a purpose, etc. So for this journal, our goal is not just to be able to summarize what happens, and not just to be able to connect to what happens. It's not just to be able to analyze the events, but we're looking specifically at Trevor Noah's use of language. How did he fit the words together to show you his purpose and convince you of whatever his message is, his purpose? So in other words, where and how do you see Trevor Noah conveying his ideas through language? We're looking at the word level, the connotative diction. He chose specific words for specific reasons and convinces audience. This is the next level of analysis that you need to achieve by the time you exit 10th grade for the next class. So we look at this by looking at his figurative language. How does he do that to convince his audience? Why does he use certain metaphors over others? How does that help him achieve his purpose? How does he use connotative language to convince his audience? We've talked a lot about that. And we're going to specifically focus on rhetorical devices. There are many, but we're going to focus on 5 to 6 in this unit. And I'm going to teach those so that you know what to look for. So for this first journal, you may not actually look at any rhetorical devices except for possibly allusion, because we talked about that last year and this year. But how does he use those devices to convince his audience? Again, we're not going to focus on that one for this first one because I need to teach you those. But you can do everything else in your analysis. And ultimately, we're trying to look at his language to determine his central idea and his purpose. Why did he write this? What was his purpose? We all have a purpose for when we write something, whether that's when we write something on Instagram, when we write something or we give a TikTok video or make a TikTok video. There's a purpose behind it. We all have a purpose, and we use language to convey that purpose. Your job with this is to analyze that. So let's go back to the beginning of the year. We talked about you probably heard me call it the rhetorical situation, also called the rhetorical triangle. It's from Aristotle. And essentially, it's all about analyzing that language. If you remember the rhetorical situation, aka triangle, I would have you fill out, this was with Macbeth specifically, but I would have you fill out the speaker. What do we know about that speaker? What are his values? What are his beliefs, etc.? Because that can lead to understanding possible bias, and that will lead to understanding his purpose. You have to look at the message. Is it logical? Is it factual? Is there credibility? Is it clear, well organized, etc.? That leads you to logos or logic. We're also looking at the audience. Who is he addressing? Who's his primary audience? And what do we know about the primary audience? And their values and their beliefs and their concerns. And so he has to keep his audience in mind to achieve the purpose. I'm not going to talk to a kindergartner like I'm going to talk to a teacher, like I'm going to talk to a teenager. I'm going to give the same information in different ways of whatever my topic might be. So writers always have to keep their audience in mind, and that's what Trevor Noah had to do. All of those, plus the context, the larger background information about what is going on in the world at the time it was written. He's writing this in 2016. And so you have to know that, because that will determine his message and help you come to his purpose. Okay? And all of those combined then gives us Trevor Noah's purpose. What's he trying to convince us of? What is his message? And purpose for using that message. What does he want us to understand? It's an argument. The whole book is an argument. It's a memoir, but it's not just about his life. You have to understand that he had a very specific purpose. So that's kind of what we're analyzing by looking at his memoir. Okay, so the directions, if we review our directions, we have you need a quotation. And if you're struggling with MLA citation format, there is a link there for you to click on to help yourself. And here are the passages you're going to choose. You need to choose one passage that does one or several of these items below. So you need to choose powerful passages, not just basic stuff because you didn't read, so you chose one at random. You really need to dig deep. Okay, so your passage that you choose can be a couple sentences, can be more than a couple sentences. I wouldn't go beyond 5 or 6, maybe 7, but whatever that quotation, aka passage, has to do at least one or more. Has to be an effective example of the author's use of figurative language and connotative language, or rhetorical devices. For now, for this journal, but not for numbers 2, 3, and 4, you'll focus on rhetorical devices as well. But for right now, focus on figurative language and connotative language. When we get to rhetorical devices, we're going to actually talk about several of them: hyperbole, which you may have already heard of, understatement, allusion, juxtaposition, oxymoron, and paradox. You're more than welcome to kind of investigate those on your own, but we are going to cover those in class so that you are successful. The passage should reveal something noteworthy about the style, right? We all have a different style. Writers have different styles. How does the passage reveal the style? Does it reveal a pattern? Do you see a lot of repetition of ideas? Because that often leads to purpose. Okay, let me stop here because that's like going back. It's getting on my nerves. Okay, all right. And details. It should strike you with some force. It should be powerful. Like there's got to be a reason why you chose this. And it could remind you of something, either personal, historical, literary, political, American versus South African policies or viewpoints or history. You could make connections to I Am Alfonso Jones, Macbeth, and The Bluest Eye. You're going to want to do that somewhere over the cross these next 4 journals. So you want to be thinking about how can I connect it? It could also make you think or question, and it might be an example of pleasing or unsettling writing where you're like, ooh, let me talk about that. Okay. Should do 1 or more. And I'm going to suggest that at least it should do 2 of those things if you want a really powerful, because you'll have a lot to talk about. Then you're going to give a response. This is not your normal annotation. You are going to comment on the quote. So you're going to do this you'll have 5 to 7 entries. So 5 to 7 quotations, 5 to 7 responses. Every single response has to be concise, no more than 100 to 200 words per entry. Okay. You're not allowed to use first person. This is academic, formal language. First thing you're going to do is give context. And then you're going to do several of the following. So 2 or more of the following things here. You could interpret, determine the meaning, significance, and purpose. You could analyze the language for the rhetorical devices or literary devices. You could look at the tone and the structure and the style and the imagery and the word choices, how words are put together, aka syntax. We're going to go kind of more in depth, but why did I choose this language? And you're going to comment on how that helps the purpose. So if he's always using language that might have a brutal tone, maybe he's got a purpose for doing that. Okay. So we're looking at the language level. And then you could also reflect and connect. What does the quote communicate about other ideas that you find in the book? Or other texts, or how does it connect to other texts or people or humanity, etc. Okay. There's a reason I had you do that theme project in 3rd quarter. There's a reason we did Bluest Eye. The more connections you can make, the better. Okay. So again, you're going to have 5 to 7 entries per reading section. We're going to be 4 reading assigned sections. So for this journal, you should have 5 entries. You'll do the next one with the next set of reading. Okay. There are 7 slots here, but again, you only have to do 5. So here's your example. We picked this quote: "You need to pray to Jesus," he said. "Jesus will save you." To which the native replied, "Well, we do need to be saved from you, but that's beside the point. So let's give this Jesus thing a shot." So I have to give context. You got to set the reader up. I'm sorry, but this is bothering me. Okay, here we go. All right. You have to set the reader up. They need to know what is going on in this specific passage. Okay. So you can do that in 1 to 2 sentences. So I chose 2 for this particular one because he's kind of got a story within a story. At this point, he's telling you, hey, my mom, when I was 9, pushed me out of the car. And he talks about how he knows it's a Sunday because they were going to church. And then he goes more and gives you a lot of background information about church and native church and how South Africans picked up the religion of their colonizers, Christianity. And so he's telling a story within a story. So you've got to recognize that. And that provides the context so I understand why Trevor Noah decides to use this story about his mom kicking him out to show you something about religion. Okay. So I say, in this passage, Trevor Noah is telling a story about being thrown out of his car and how he knows it is Sunday because he was on his way to church. He uses this time to reflect on the religion of South Africa, pointing out that the religion of Christianity has been forced upon the natives and they accept it. That's part of his purpose, right? He's pointing that out to you. And then he's going to talk about the reaction and how that goes with his family, and what his family believes versus what he believes throughout the novel. Then I get into interpreting and analyzing. These are my ideas as I'm like, okay, I think this is why he's doing it. Trevor uses this specific example to make the point that the religion he grew up with in South Africa is not the native religion and is actually the religion of the colonizers. His purpose, see, I go back to that language in my directions. This is what I think the purpose is right now of this passage. His purpose for this explanation is to show how religious his mom and entire family is and how that contrasts with what he thinks about religion. So we're going to pretend that we've read a little further. And when I picked this, I realized that was his purpose. Often what you might have to do is read a chunk of it and then say, okay, now what quotation can I pick? That is my method. Often I'm reading and I'm just marking things in the book. And then I would go to this graphic organizer and I would say, okay, what do I want to focus on? Because I like to be in the story. So because I like to be in the story, sometimes I annotate after the fact that I've read it. Like I might mark something, but I don't pause to write something, whatever your style is. And then I add a little bit of reflection and connection because as soon as I was writing that, I was like, oh, this makes me think of history and policies in the United States. So I make that connection. This is the same thing. Notice the transitional language here that happened in the US during slavery. Those who were enslaved were forced to take on the slaveholders' religion, which was predominantly Christianity at that time. So that's my connection. But then I kind of go back to analysis. So you can see you can kind of weave it in there. Ultimately, it seems like Trevor Noah wants his audience, so his goal, his purpose, to see that connection because his audience maybe primarily be in the US. I'm making an inference here based on what I know about Trevor Noah. I know he now lives in the United States and he is from South Africa. And when he writes this, he lives in the United States. So we have to assume that his audience is probably the US. There's probably worldwide, but I feel like he's making that point to the US, like, yeah, US, and you did the same thing, right? And then we got to deal with that as audience members, like, oh, okay, now I got to reflect on that, okay? Now, there's many directions. Everyone's going to have different analysis, but as long as you make your case, you're okay. This is why we stress CEA a lot, because this kind of fits the CEA mold here, the claim evidence analysis. And the last thing that you are going to do is make sure you hit between 100 and 200 words, no more, no less. There are some of you that write a lot, and I've actually tried to train you to write all your thoughts down. Now we're going to kind of pull back and say, if we're focused on language, how can we be concise and convey the same thing that 5 paragraphs might convey, right? So we got to pick our words carefully. You didn't see my process, but while I was doing this, I was typing, then deleting, like, oh, how could I say that better? So you're going to do that kind of naturally. The final thing that you're probably going to want to make sure you remember is you got to check the word count and list the word count for me. So here's how we do that. Okay. You highlight the passage like you see here. That's your first step. Your second step is at the very top, you're going to click tools and then you're going to click word count like you see right here. Then it's going to pop up this little message. You are looking for words and you're looking for this first number, 169 of 1097. You're looking for that first one because that correlates with or connects with what I highlighted. Okay, so you want to do that for every response. So 5 total, 5 entries 5 to 7. I would stick with 5 because you're getting right. You're learning this style. On this first journal that you turn in, I'm going to give lots of feedback, right? We're going to actually do some of this in class on Wednesday. We're going to continue to make sure you are successful so that numbers 2, 3, and 4 are successful as we go on. Okay. And that is it, my friends. If you decide to read ahead, you have all of the materials. You have journal assignment 2, 3, and 4 as well. So you're more than welcome to do that. So one last final reminder, please, 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 please do not copy and paste whatever you find on the web. Please have integrity. You guys are in honors for a reason. Part of that is integrity, and part is that because you can handle the workload. And even if you weren't, don't copy and paste. I would much rather you try it so I can figure out how to help you. But if you copy and paste, I can't do that. So don't plagiarize. Most of you are pretty good at that. Some of you tend to do that. So be careful. Other than that, I think you guys are being successful. You guys have been working on rhetoric all year. This is just the next level. And that, my friends, is it. Now I got to figure out how to stop. Ooh, nope, that's a rectangle. Pause. All right, I'll see you Wednesday.